Excellent. So we're going to jump in there, and tonight's a big feature is exactly this. We want to see what's possible when you are on a podcast as a guest. Now, you've seen the statistics. Podcasts are growing and growing and growing. We see there are over 5 million podcasts around the world at the moment, and there are gazillions of episodes out there. But what's interesting is that the number of podcasts and the number of listeners continues to grow. For those of us who are in the developed world, there's already a high uptake of podcasts. And for those of us in the developing world, podcasts are really beginning to take off as more technologies take root, as access to Wi-Fi and to better mobile services becomes available. So now truly is the time to capitalize on this. One of the great things is you're on a podcast, whether it's local or international, you're getting international exposure. And you're getting it within a community of people who are really passionately interested in a topic. You also get to expand your digital footprint considerably, because every one podcast tends to have quite a few links associated with it. And if your name is mentioned there together with your expertise, you're really starting to build extra traction, build extra authority online. So there's a lot of power in this. But the great thing is really in this dedicated niche audience. So you truly have a chance to go and reach your ideal target audience among people who are already interested in this topic and people who already trust the podcast host enough because they're probably listening not for the first time, and many of their followers will be listening regularly. So when somebody gives you the honor of appearing on their podcast, they're actually handing you a stamp of their endorsement. It's a motion of trust, a motion of confidence that people can actually see this is someone who works within this field, within this niche, and they're featuring you as an expert. That's always so much more authority than any amount of advertising or any amount of you blowing your own trumpet, no matter how good you are, can ever give you, because somebody else has then added to your authority. So there's a lot of power in this. Here's the thing. It's easy to go on a podcast and fall into a couple of traps. For example, you might not actually be on the best podcast, the one that showcases you best. You might not actually really demonstrate your expertise. And the very sad thing is when you're on a podcast and then so what? You know, there's this one episode and nothing comes of it. The whole point of this is to actually get trackable results. And that measurement is the really, really exciting thing. The measurement is what allows you to see what were the actual results of this podcast. So let's go jump in and take a look at exactly where those that information lies. And one of the first things is you want to be on the right podcast, right? So what are the very, very best ways to make sure that the podcast where you become a guest is in the right place? By the way, I see in the chat, Cindy has said it's evergreen. And that's a very, very good point, because a lot of podcasts are going to be out there for the long haul. And once it's there, it still is going to carry on getting search engine traction. Many podcasts also have a YouTube channel associated, which is one of the second biggest search engine in the world at the moment. And then some of them will also add articles or blog posts that refer back to the podcast. So all of this gives you a lot of traction. But back to our question of how do you land on the right podcasts? Now, when it comes to media strategy and appearing in different media platforms, whether it's traditional media or online media, there are two strategies you can take. One, be reactive. See who's looking for information on people like you, who's looking for a source or an expert like you, and follow them. And that's lovely, because then you know there's a high demand, there's urgency. They want to hear from you. The problem with this is the notice tends to be very short. The deadlines are as short so short that sometimes there's not enough time to slip into the cracks and actually catch that opportunity while it's hot. The other option is to take a slower approach and start watching who's out there doing the kind of work that could interest you, and then building up a relationship with them over time. So here's story time. You all have come across different people, different experts who promote themselves online. All of you are on LinkedIn, and you will have seen on LinkedIn there are many opportunities to go and build a relationship with people who are out there. Now, in the course of last year, I started working with a client who really wanted to be on podcasts, and we thought we'd start with really low-hanging fruit. So we took the reactive approach. We would see who's looking for guests that would be in his expertise, and then if it's a small podcast or it's a new podcast, we can introduce him as a potential guest, and then he, can take whatever opportunities come his way. Little did we know what was going to happen next, because we actually started discovering how many podcasting opportunities there are out there. In the first couple of weeks of our campaign, we applied to a lot of different podcasts, and one of them was a brand new podcast that was kind of taking anybody, and we thought, hey, let's just give it a go. Well, by the time they got back to us, this client had been on podcasts that are so internationally renowned, that have such a strong following, that are so strongly into his niche, that he actually had to say, thank you so much, I'm not available for that interview anymore. Because he'd graduated, and it happened just that fast. But now here's another little secret about how it happened, because the first time he appeared on a podcast, it was kind of by request and working through a network and a contact. And this was an international podcast with high credibility and international reach. Within a few months, that podcast episode had brought in a new potential client. So somebody who'd heard him on a podcast made contact out of the seeming blue. So these things do happen. It's like podcasting can be a little bit like a Disney movie. Absolutely amazing things can happen for you. So that was one of the first amazing things that happened. And then there was another podcast that we thought, well, this podcast is getting awards and it's getting international attention. It's a little bit above our target for the moment, but let's start building the road. So we gradually started commenting on the podcaster's posts and listening to the podcast and making really good comments and really contributing to their community. We thought maybe someday in the near future we could pitch the client as a guest. Well, guess what? We never got to pitch the client as a guest, because the podcaster came through and said, you look like a really interesting authority to interview on this podcast. And so it happened that they had a really brilliant interview that placed the client within an excellent market. And because it was such a high quality podcast, this podcaster actually provided the copy for social media posts, graphics for social media posts, video clips for social media posts. She included the podcast on all major platforms for audio podcasts, as well as her YouTube channel, and in an article and several follow-up posts, as well as a LinkedIn live audio event. So the digital footprint of that podcast episode was massive within the ideal target market. Now, that is the stuff that Disney dreams are made of, and it really is available. Now, Of course, a lot of this depends on your expertise and it depends on the field you are in, but no matter what area you are in, there is somebody out there who's looking for your expertise, your passion, your experience. And even if there isn't a podcast dedicated to that subject, you can start to build a niche, getting a toe in the door by appearing on a general podcast. There are so many podcasts now looking for stories about how you did it, how you overcame an obstacle, how you built your business, how you built your career, that there is absolutely no excuse to say, well, I couldn't do it. Somebody out there wants to hear your voice. So those are the opportunities. And in terms of the proactive approach, one of the best ways is just go see what podcasts are in your field. And you'll see some of them are big, some of them are popular, some of them are winning awards and getting talked about, and they have millions of followers. But maybe there's one that's smaller where you can try and work your way up the list. And doing this just over time, whether it is by getting in touch with the podcasters proactively, or just seeing who's looking for someone, or just becoming a good follower, becoming a good participant in their community, you can already start building value and start building connections and your network. Of course, you're on a borrowed platform, so behave yourself nicely, but I know you're going to do that anyway, right? Something that I did mention in the previous session on podcast guesting was where you can find the different people who are looking for podcasters. And one of the great resources is podcastguests.com. And podcastguests.com sends out an email newsletter twice a week with 10 delectable podcasts that are looking for guests. They're from all the fields that you could possibly want to know about. And even if you're not ready right now, you can always start listening to that podcast, right? Go see what are they doing. So just go put an ear against the ground. And if you're a Media Strategy Mafia member, well, you also have a chance to dive into the Media Strategy for Visionaries LinkedIn group, where I go and put in the very, very best picks from podcastguests.com every week. So you don't even have to subscribe to the email newsletter. You can take advantage of that avenue. But one of the benefits of subscribing is that then you can also go build your own profile there. So see if you want to subscribe or simply eavesdrop via the Media Strategy for Visionaries LinkedIn group. And those are some of the approaches to take. It really is possible to go find the ideal ones. Now, the first podcast you go on might not be the perfect one, but do go get that foot in the door. And here's why. Because chances are your first time won't be perfect. It's very, very possible. Now, because it's hard to listen to ourselves, and this is one of the things that came up in yesterday's session, is that people say, I don't like the sound of my own voice, or I have a strange speech habit and all of this. People, have you listened to me? I have a lisp. I have a habit of saying, and I notice that when I'm in front of a microphone, that you hear me breathing in every time before I say a new sentence. And a lot of these things are less than perfect. But guess what? I wouldn't even know it if I weren't willing to go and listen to myself. So yes, there are things we can improve, but the fact is, if you don't start somewhere, it's not going to happen. And give yourself some grace. Nobody's perfect. And the best thing that's happened in the whole social media world over the past couple of years is that our big new thing is authenticity. We're much more interested in who you really are and what you really bring and your message, your visionary message that you have to share, than we are in analyzing just how perfect a speaker you are. So there's a fine line between being generous to yourself, being patient with yourself, but also going to see what can you do to start speaking better. So what can hold you back if you go on a podcast is that you might not sound like the expert that you truly are because you're not quite comfortable with it yet. So how did you learn to walk when you were a baby? How did you learn to ride a bicycle? How did you learn to drive a car? You did the incredibly scary thing of just going out there and doing it. So if you want to go on podcasts, play a little game with yourself. And you're allowed to raise your hand if you did this as a kid. Turn on a tape recorder if you're old enough to remember what a tape recorder was back in the day. You got into a room and you turned on the tape recorder and you hit record and you had your own little radio show. Well, you know what? You don't need a tape recorder anymore. You have got a fantastic voice note recording application on your smartphone. Do yourself a favor, take 10 minutes and just go have a little interview with yourself. Introduce yourself. Tell people what is the message that you share. Explain your newest product. Explain your offering. Give some of your tips. Do all this, just go play the game. And if you want to get really hardcore, because I know we have people here who have done this as well, go get in front of a mirror or go get in front of your computer. Turn on, start a new Zoom meeting and interview yourself, film yourself as well while you're at it, because it's going to be a painful process, but go and learn the lessons on your own private recording so you don't have to do it in public, because there is going to be a learning curve. There are going to be new things to discover. And then there are some things that people are going to ask you over and over and over and over again, because this is your expertise. Tell your story. Tell us who you are. That elevator pitch or self-introduction that we've been practicing in many of our sessions, that little piece comes in so handy. Your 30-second version of introducing yourself, your 60-second version. And then for the people who truly are committed, how long can you bore them with your amazing story, right? So find the ways to really get that eye-catching, ear-catching, heart-catching first introduction, 30 seconds. And from there, see how can you expand on this if you need to speak longer. Start practicing to speak about these things. And if a script helps, fantastic. You're probably going to find having some bullets is going to help the most. And once again, this is going to be a work in progress forever, absolutely forever. But that is a really, really good way to get started on these things. The big tripper upper is the confounded and can be such a big way to trip us up. Since I started hearing myself in recordings, I've become so incredibly aware of how easy it is to say But there are many, many little tricks around this. And there's one that you've seen TV personalities use, people like Trevor Noah and international speakers, all the TV hosts, Larry King. What do they do when they want to say Go watch them carefully. And this is the secret. When they want to say they've trained themselves so well that instead of saying they're going to start the sentence again. Go and watch. If you watch some of the late night TV shows and talk shows, you'll notice that this is one of the techniques that they use. Another one is you can find meaningful filler words. You might find words that you can stretch out while you win some time. Another one, and this is a really helpful one when you are chatting with someone or you're being interviewed, or even if you have an audience, is just have a pause for them. And it looks like this. How do you think? How do you feel about that? What's your opinion? Is that right? So little questions like these, you can just throw in so that your brain can have a break and just quickly think. And then another wonderful substitute for the notorious Take a tip from Simon and Garfunkel and touch the sound of silence. The pause can be incredibly powerful. So if there is an coming, what's going to happen if you just take the pause and take it with power, with poise, and with grace? So there are many, many ways around the One of the best is do go and deliberately practice your important sound bites. But another thing is simply go and use another fabulous tool that's become part of our lives, your voice notes. So the voice note challenge goes like this. Go listen to the last 3 voice notes you sent. And this is a challenge for me too, because I am so guilty as charged. Go listen to your last 3 voice notes and count the ums per minute. So you've heard about kilometers per hour, right? kmph. This is going to be UPM, ums per minute. What's your ums per minute? And can you bring it down to 0? So only one thing can change the and that is your focus. Now, I'll tell you a little secret about my podcast. So on the League of Visionaries podcast, I have a deal. Whoever edits my podcast, and I edited the first few episodes, and I'm working with a new editor who's starting out in the world of podcasting. He's used to music, so he now has a whole new challenge of editing, talking. And I've said to him, in the first 5 minutes, there may be no ums from me or from the guest. Edit out every edit out every overly long pause, because in those first few minutes, new visitors, new listeners are going to hear this person for the first time. We really want to frame them and place them as an expert. And no matter how much of an expert they are, if they say a few ums, it's going to undermine their credibility and it's going to undermine the podcast. So I really want to place them in the best possible light in those first 5 minutes. Then the first impression is made. So in the next 5 minutes, we're trimming down the ums a little bit. We can still leave a few in. And after that, we're not too concerned about this. If it's not a terrible, catastrophic we're just going to keep it in there. So editing is a wonderful thing. But the fact is, in many cases, we're speaking live. In many cases, we won't be edited. Many podcasts just go out in the raw. So the better prepared we are for this, the better. But going to prepare your core questions is really good. And then one of the great questions that came up in yesterday's session is, but how can I prepare if I don't know what the questions are going to be? So you can prepare in a couple of ways. And I wonder in the chat, I see some good things have been happening in the chat, and I'm going to check in there quickly. Let me know in the chat, what would you suggest to prepare for going onto a podcast so that you won't be surprised by the questions? Yep, I see some really good points here in the chat. So one of the things was Kendra was speaking about how podcasts come up when you get Googled, and also mentioning that Simon Sinek often repeats himself to gain time. A lot of other people do that. Yes, beautiful. Voice recordings on the phone work so well, Susan says. Awesome. And yes, keeping your introduction exciting. That's a very important one. Thank you, Kendra. And other filler words are things like, especially where you're from, Kendra. I believe the Cape Townians love to say like, as well as hey, shoo, wow, but maybe that's changed over time. It used to be hey, shoo, wow. And I think there was the Fully Truly Hey, Shoo, Wow band back in, I think, the late 90s, if I remember correctly. Right, the UPMs, yes, the ums per minute, Susan, that's it, yes. And the smooth and fast. Yes, beautiful. Thank you, Susan. And those, again, working through some dummy questions is a great tip. Thank you, Kendra. Beautiful. And Cindy, know yourself really well, your product, your offering. You know me on the topic of know yourself, right? This was the Oracle at Delphi had the words, and the Oracle in the Matrix as well, had the words, know thyself over the entrance. And this is a very important thing. It's even more important for business owners and for experts and for entrepreneurs and enthusiasts like you. Know yourself, know your offering. Great stuff. So some ways to get into those questions that they might ask. One way, well, you could go and listen to previous episodes of their podcasts. In fact, this is really good manners anyway. Make sure that you really want to be on this podcast. Otherwise, you show up there and you have no context and you have no preparation for the style that they have. And also, if you have listened to previous episodes, you can even refer back to them. You can use this to connect to your host and even to connect to previous guests. So that's a really powerful trick. Go and listen, do your homework, do your due diligence. And this is the great thing about podcasts, right? You can listen while you're going for a walk or doing your chores or driving. So make use of that time, listen to the podcast. If your ears are trained for it, listen a little bit at a higher speed. You can get through it faster, right? So listen to previous podcasts, get to know the show, get to know the host and their style. Now, really good podcast hosts are also going to send you a cheat sheet to prepare, and they might send you the typical questions they ask. For my podcast, what I do is I have a guest guidelines document, and this includes all the information that people will need, and it also includes 10 typical questions. Now, I try to ask the typical questions, but very often my guests are so incredibly interesting and fascinating that we get derailed, and that's actually where the real fun begins. But there are some core questions. On the Happier at Work podcast by Aoife O'Brien, she always asks guests this question: what makes you happier at work? Everything else, she specifies exactly to the guests' specific expertise and their message. But that one question is always the same. On my podcast, The League of Visionaries, I always ask the question, and this is the first one I ask: what's your visionary message? And then I allow people to elaborate on this. So having your message in a nutshell is something that's really effective for this. Kendra, you have repeating the question and making sure that you understand what people are looking for. That's a really, really good trick anytime. And this is a really good one for things like Q&As. If you're a speaker, so Kalnisha, this one is for you, and for Snazo, who's also possibly joining us on some occasions. If you are a speaker and you get a question, you can always repeat or paraphrase that question, and you can explicitly say, do I understand that correctly, or is this what you mean? Or you could very simply rephrase the question. And another thing that I've seen guests on my podcast say, and I hope they mean this from the heart, but it's also a good trick, is, that's a great question. Right? That's always a good one. That's a great question. Makes your host feel very, very good. I'm always touched when I hear that. So even if it's just a trick, it works very, very well, softens up your host. I like it. Very nice. Thank you, Kendra. And then there's a magic trick. You might have heard about this yesterday as we were discussing the podcast guesting possibilities. And that is to actually give your host the questions you want, right? So tell them, what are the kind of questions that really draw out the best in you? Now, with many podcast applications, they'll have a form or they'll have some application process where you can speak about the things that are important to you. And if they're doing their homework well, they'll do some research on you. But to exactly frame what questions you want, the magic formula is called the podcast one sheet. And the podcast one sheet is a fabulous little A4 document that you can prepare that's going to give them all the information they need to fall in love with you as a guest the first time they see it. So we're looking for love at first sight for you as a podcast guest. And I think this would be a good time to show you what a podcast one sheet looks like. If you have a media kit or you have a speaker sheet or a speaker kit, this is very similar and elements of it will be the same, but you're pitching especially to podcasts. So that is why this is such a significant thing. And the good news is in your kit for today, I'm actually going to share with you a link to a podcast one sheet that I created. And as usual, my poster child is my fantastic client, Ian Hatton, who has had wonderful success with podcasting. And since he's a speaker, he already had a speaker sheet ready. So a lot of this is the same. Let's see what's in here. And it's your turn in the chat. Please let me know, what elements do you see here? Should I make this a bit bigger? Let's see if we can do that. Let me do it here. Yes, so this is the template that you'll have access to, but you can get really creative with your template. Okay, let's make this one a little bit bigger. Sorry, guys, I hate to admit it when I'm having screen dysfunction, but here we go. Now we're nice and big. Okay. What elements do you see? Let me know in the chat. We'll go over it nice and slowly, top to bottom. So here's an example of an element. First thing is the name, right? Name, profile photograph. What else is here? Oh, in fact, I can give you the link, right? Let me see, you can actually go and see it right there. Here you go, let me put that in the chat for you so you don't have to be completely lost. There you go. Okay. Ooh, la la. Okay, lovely. Good stuff in the chat. Let's see. Kendra is saying, what's the QR code for? Nicely spotted, Kendra. You'll have an opportunity to find out in a second. Susan, contact details. Very, very nice. Cindy, name, picture, exit. Cindy, you've got an edge here. Nicely done. Name, the picture, the expert topics, social media links, and testimonials. Very, very nice. Excellent. And at the link there, you'll see all the different elements. So Kendra asked what the QR code is for, and I know we have some very destructible students in this class. I'm sure somebody scanned the QR code already. Actually, Cindy, this is one of those QR codes we're going to update. Now, in Ian's case, he had, yeah, Susan, I knew it. I knew it. I'm always delighted when somebody's gotten out of hand, and I'm extra delighted if it's you. That's wonderful. So on this QR code, in Ian's case, we used to include a link to his monthly live event. So when people scan this QR code, if you should happen to scan this QR code, you'll find a link that goes through to past recordings of these events, as well as the link to the next one. Why do we want that? Because when they register for the next event, we have their email address. So they will then go through a process of confirming that they're open to receiving updates. They get one email a month to alert them that there's an event coming. And after the event, they get an email to let them know what was in the event, a link to the recording, and other resources. So we never pester them, but we always offer them value on a monthly basis. Right. So yes, we had some good stuff here. There's something that actually is not in this one sheet, so I need to update that. Does anybody see what would be missing underneath Ian's name? What do we need here?
His title.
Right, exactly. His title or his headline or his description. That is excellent. Yes, and Kendra says here, this will give people a chance to hear his voice. Right, very, very good. So this puts him up as a speaker. In other cases, we use other places where the QR code will lead them, like his assessment. But for this, it will get them a chance to hear how he speaks and what his ideas are. So that's really well put, Susan. So we could put here Ian Hatton. We should also add conscious leadership expert and international keynote speaker, so that people can see exactly what he's about. And then here there is a short bio. So here we say what he does, what his background is, and what makes him an ideal podcast guest. This third paragraph says, Ian Hatton is the ideal podcast guest for audiences intent on not only performance today, but also lasting legacy beyond tomorrow. Prepare your audience to #GetMorpheus. So if you have a tradition or a hashtag or something that relates exactly to your experience, you can even draw people into this with something like that. And then we have suggested interview topics. And this is very powerful because here you can now guide your host. You're saving them time because preparing to create a podcast is hard work. So you can save them time by helping them to pick a topic that's most useful to him. And we even give them 5 suggested interview questions. How incredibly useful is that, right? So with this, you can actually take advantage of that and do even more with it. And then we have this fantastic snippet of a testimonial from an influential young woman in Nigeria who heard one of Ian's talks. People go and Google her and they see how far she's gone on since she said this. She said it was life transforming. That's 2 words that says everything we need. Right. We have all the links here. And the great thing here is you can make your links clickable and an email address where people can get in touch. And then there's a quick description of an offering. So if you have a program, for example, Kendra, in your case, you might have a membership program where people can get involved. Or if you have a YouTube channel, where are people going to get the best feeling, the best taste of what you do? So give them an opportunity to get to know you there. And with this one single page, you have now done your podcast host such a great service, because here is somebody who demonstrates his value and who makes preparing for that whole session so easy. All they need to do is read off the bio exactly as it is in your one sheet. They can ask the questions exactly as you've given it to them, and they have all the resources they need to go and find out that you are a fantastic podcast guest. So there we go. Any thoughts?
Has anybody ever thought that your suggested questions is a bit cheeky, or has it always gone down well?
Interesting. Well, they're suggested questions, so they're not imperative questions, right? So they always have they have a wide choice, but in most cases, they're going to be really, really grateful. And the interesting thing is, podcast one sheets are really big in the world of the podcast guesting services. So if you were in the session yesterday, you might remember that podcast guesting services can charge as much as $25,000 a year to put you on podcasts. And one of their services is that they prepare an irresistible podcast one sheet for you. And they say this is a really great tool. But the truth is, with all of the podcast hosts that I've dealt with, they haven't actually started to tap this tool yet. So there's clearly a bit of a mismatch between what the podcast hosts are doing and what the guests are doing. But if you have this one sheet, the fact that you can attach it to your application means, or you can just have a link, right? Keep this in your Google Drive and you can just have a link to it so people can just click straight through and go find out there. So nobody said it's cheeky so far. I think they're quite grateful, but there's no pressure on them. Does that answer your question, Kendra?
It does. Thank you.
Because like in your field, right, as a financial coach, you're in a really, really good position to actually guide people with the right kinds of questions to ask. And because you now know what those questions are, you can really prepare for them. You can have really good resources. You can even drop in that, oh, and by the way, I have a special spreadsheet that will help you calculate this, right? And then you can share that link with them and so on. So if another thing you can do is actually have some really nice resources that your hosts can share. So that's another nice thing that you can do. And Susan is saying, what a great tool for your media toolkit. Absolutely, Susan. So this is the podcast version of your media kit that you would have available for the media. If you're a speaker, you have a speaker kit or a speaker sheet that's available for guest event organizers. So the podcast one sheet really gives you a lot of possibilities with that. Now, the other resource that can be of tremendous value to you is, where do you take people once you are on the podcast, right? Because why are you there? And this question could vary over time. When you start out in the world of business, it's very easy to think, well, you know, this can get me new clients. And yes, it can get you new clients. But what it's probably going to get you is more podcast guesting opportunities, speaking opportunities, connections, networking opportunities, and a lot of unsolicited requests for business. This is just part of the game, unfortunately. But the clients are probably not going to convert right overnight. I don't know how many first dates you've been on, but not many of them lead to marriage. It's very much the same with every form in which we do any kind of business. And that is really the difference between marketing and PR. Marketing is looking at much more of an immediate sale, and PR is looking at building a relationship. That is public relationship. This is really where podcast guesting is going to take you. But you can have the opportunity to gain followers. So you've seen from Ian's podcast one sheet, all his links are in there. But many podcast guests will ask you, which links would you like us to share in the description? And many of them are very, very generous. They'll include all the links that you provide. So the question is, where are you going to take them? LinkedIn is a fabulous place if you're working in the business-to-business sphere, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to interact with the people, to know quite a lot about them if they connect with you, because once somebody connects with you, you can actually see where they work, what they do, who their connections are, and all these things. So LinkedIn is really a gold mine. But what if there's something that can help the people to stay in your sphere, in your zone, and can help you to follow up with them again? So something that people have done in the past is have a lead magnet. And we've all done this, right? We've all seen, here is a really amazing resource, and all I have to do is pop in my email address, and you put in your email address and they email it to you, and you get this wonderful little resource, and maybe you decide, wow, this is amazing, and I'm going to follow them for a while. Maybe you're so impressed that you immediately decide, oh man, I'm just going to buy coaching with these people, or book their course, or buy their book, or whatever it is that they're selling, because they're selling something behind that. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But all of this is about getting you in their email list. And if they're nice, like Ian is, they're going to send you something really valuable once a month, and maybe a follow-up once a month, or maybe every week. If they're not so nice, they're going to start spamming the living daylights out of you, and you've signed away your right to be on that mailing list. Now, you can always unsubscribe, but the real art is in finding what are you going to give those people that they're going to be delighted to open up. And if you want to experience what it is to be delighted by an email, go take a look at Marie Forleo. Marie Forleo is a business coach specializing in women, helping them to do the work that they can do in the world. And she's built an empire around this. And if you get into Marie Forleo's mailing list, she does email the living daylights out of you, but every email is gorgeous. It's exciting. It's funny. It's fun. It's like a good gossip with your best girlfriend. It's so real and connecting and exciting, and it's so valuable. Now, if you can do that, people might actually forgive you. So you do want to be careful with where you take people afterwards. But this is very much the nature of a free lead magnet. And in many cases, people might come to your free lead magnet, which could be a little document, it could be a report, it could be an audio guide, it could be a master class. There are so many things that you could make available. And if you have a simple website, you can do it from there. If you use a customer relationship management tool like MailChimp, you can even create a little landing page there that's going to send them your information. There are many, many, many ways to do this. But you won't necessarily know that they came from that podcast unless you create a unique link for it. So there are some technical elements to this, but it can be done quite easily if you are that way inclined, that you can see exactly how many people have joined your mailing list. And very often, if you look at the statistics, which the data is one of the rich things that we're offered, that actually can be a guide. You know, you can see, oh, the podcast went out and there's this big spike in subscriptions. Well, that is what's going to happen. And usually within a week, there's going to be a big spike in unsubscriptions as well. This is normal. It's part of the game. And people have the right to not be mailed, right? This is an opportunity for them to see, do they really want to work with you or not? But the lead magnet does have the small detractor that people who have said, well, I'm happy to have this for free, are not necessarily people who are eager to buy something. So in many cases, that's if you just want to spread your message, you just want followers, that's 100% fine. If you have more of a goal to start generating income from this, there is a golden midway between having to give something away completely for free and between selling something really expensive. And one really, really good way to do this is with what the wonderful author Pia Silva calls a lead product. So a lead product is something that people will want after discovering you online, for example, on a podcast, but then they have an opportunity to go and buy this thing. And once they buy it, they're in your mailing list, and you know that there are people who are willing to take out money to do business with you. And I am so sorry to stir this very scandalous topic, but the fact is, and there's so much taboo around this, but the fact is this: doing what we love is fantastic. If it doesn't make money, it's called a hobby. If it's a business, part of the plan is actually to bring you an income from the work you are doing so well, with so much passion and with so much love and with so much care for the people you are helping. Do you or don't you deserve it? Now, we're not talking about robbing people blind. We're not talking about deceiving anybody. We really are talking about opening up an opportunity for them to get hold of something that is going to let them try your services with a lower commitment. They don't have to spend a fortune, but they do get the benefit and they do come into your circle. You have their contact details and you get some form of reward for it. And one of the great ways to do this is with a membership program. And one of the super platforms for doing this that is not terribly difficult to master is Gumroad. And I'd love to show you what Gumroad looks like. And I see our time is once again, our clock is ticking, but I am going to take you through to this page quickly to give you a quick look at what Gumroad can do for you. So Gumroad is a little marketplace service, and you'll find it at gumroad.com. The link for this is going to be in this evening's resources, and I'll share the link to that one with you in a second. And Gumroad helps you to sell wonderful things. They even have a little Gumroad University. And at Gumroad University, they teach you how to start selling small digital products. It could be, and they will even allow you to sell something like an ordinary lead magnet that is available for free, but you can allow people to pay what they want. So if they want to give you $5, lovely. If they want to give you $10, fantastic. They have the opportunity to reward you. But one of their most exciting offers is membership programs. So with membership programs, you actually can allow people to pay once a month, and it can be a small amount. It could be even $1, or it could be, I think they put a minimum of $1, but you could make something for $3 a month. And it just separates the people who are not willing to pay at all from the people who are willing to support you somewhat. And the experience that you've had with the Media Strategy Mafia, this is all hosted on Gumroad. And as you can see, it's not a super sophisticated platform, but it's a reasonably sophisticated platform where you can provide everything that you want to. And every month you can give people something. And with this one, as you've seen with the Mafia, you even have a month to try it out for free. So within that time, people have more than enough opportunity to see, is this something that's going to be of value to them? And if so, they can stay on. If it's not going to offer them value, no skin off their back. They will need to fill in their payment details, but they will get an email saying, your membership is going to renew. Would you like to continue? If so, just sit back and relax. But if you'd like to terminate your membership, no harm done. Just remember to cancel it before the payment goes off, and they can cancel it anytime. So this way you have all the benefit of a free lead magnet, but you have the conversion option that can take it into a paid product that people can then give you some compensation for. And it's a beautiful way to start experimenting with what people need, with the questions that they have to ask, and provide the kind of value that you would usually give to people in a one-on-one consultation, but because you're providing it to a bigger group, you can do so with without having to keep the prices very high. The prices are mitigated, it's much more evenly spread out, and you in the process are learning. You're learning, and this is certainly something I do with the Mafia, you're learning how to add value to that community of people, you're building the community, and you're even getting an opportunity to see what questions do they ask, what do they need, where can you add more value, how can you develop your products in future. So it's something I definitely recommend. And when it comes to payments and rewarding your hosts, Gumroad has what they call an affiliate program. And with this, you can actually allow anybody who recommends people to you to have their own unique link. So when they recommend your product or your membership, then they receive a percentage. with a podcast host. This means the podcast host can get your affiliate link and you can assign a commission. So basically, they could get 10% for anybody who arrives through their link on their podcast. And if it's something that doesn't cost you a lot of money to provide, you can even give them a 20% or a 50% reward. Now, not every podcast host wants to make money out of your being on the show, but think about the benefit of that. And on a membership program, this recurs as long as people stay subscribed. So, for example, if you have a membership program and you go onto a podcast and you charge $10 a month for your membership program and you provide a 20% affiliate fee, referral fee for the people who joined you, for the host, then if 10 people come from their show onto your membership program, they stay for the first month, 5 drop off, 5 stay on and pay that $10. They've now paid you $50 and 20% goes to the podcast host. So your podcast host gets, oh, give me a hand here, 20% of $50 is, they get their cut, right? And then what happens next month? As long as they stay on, your podcast host will continue to get that little fee every month. So there actually really is a longer sense of reward in this that can be financial. And the beautiful thing is a platform like Gumroad, which is one of many options you can use, but a very friendly one, will actually handle all this for you automated. And one last bonus, they also give you a chance to send out emails and even build email workflows. So it can solve a lot of the problems if you're just starting out and you don't want to make a massive outlay on a website or on customer relationship management software and all these things. Gumroad can be a beautiful solution and it can reward your hosts and it can start getting you paid for some of the wonderful things that you do. But all this with the opportunity for people who come and try out your services to, yes, try it out for free, but with the option to stay on. And that's correct. Yes, Kendra, you can also build an email list from there and you can always export it if you move on to a more sophisticated platform. So I have made a lot of promises about this hour. I hope I've been able to fulfill them because I think there are so many exciting possibilities, but all of these just give you ways to make your results more measurable. And I'd love to hear where you're headed in podcasting. Do come and drop in on the Media Strategy for Visionaries group on LinkedIn. If there's anything that seems to be related to your field, if you're a Mafia member, I'm going to tag you. So keep an eye out on your LinkedIn and see if there are any opportunities for you. And maybe you can go out and make your own rain. That would be really amazing. Thank you all so much. And I see I've gone over time already because I'm so excited to be with all of you. But you are very, very welcome to stay on if you have any questions. I'm going to end our recording here. And that means there's room for questions. If you're a Mafia member and you're watching the recording of this afterwards, you can always come and discuss it in the Media Strategy for Visionaries group. So there we are. Thank you all so much. I'm going to end the recording. And if you're still here for a question or two, I'd love to share that with you. Thanks, everybody.